Hi there, Dr. Brian here, and I have Jan Roberts with me today. She's our guest blogger over the next series of blogs. She is a champion of women's health. She's a published author. Tell the punters about you.
Well, I started life as a pharmacist, Brian, and that morphed into nutritional medicine, and my specialty when I got out of pharmacy was preconception health. And that's where my books have been focused on the health of both partners before they conceive a child, as a way of having the healthiest baby possible.
Clean the oven and get the right ingredients in place.
Absolutely right. It's a squeaky clean lifestyle in the 4 months before conception. But as I've got older, the inspiration for my work was my 2 sons. They're now young men with family of their own, and I have not switched gears exactly, but taken the same programs which were so hugely successful for couples planning a pregnancy into the other stage of the reproductive cycle, the other end of the reproductive cycle, which is
the no reproductive cycle.
no reproduction going on here, peri and postmenopause. And this is an area that women sadly still know very little about, I have found.
Well, I think having just witnessed Lisa have a baby, there's quite a lot of interesting secrecy amongst women about women's lives, because all the women said, oh, wait till she finds out about having a baby, and no one actually said it's going to be like this. It's like you get the parcel home, unwrap it, and discover it's got a few sharp edges.
And I'll tell you, there's no service to women in secrecy.
Yes,
we need to know more,
yes.
which is what my blogs are going to try and uncover. Deep dive into menopause.
Absolutely.
Because it's even a publisher balked at the word. I wanted to publish a book on menopause, and they didn't want a bar of it.
It's interesting because it's
sad.
I presume the publisher wasn't a woman.
The commissioning editor was a woman, but
Right.
the board, the editorial board, were all blokes.
All blacks, yeah.
So,
Interesting.
say no more.
It's not like it's a dirty word by any means.
No, but we have euphemistically referred to it as the change.
The change, yeah, sounds like the weather.
Well, it is a bit like that, very unpredictable.
Yes. So this blog that we're talking about today is something of an overview.
It is.
And so there's stages, there are recognised medical stages in menopause.
Well, I think yes, correct. Women need to know what to expect, when to expect it, and then, of course, what I would really like to deal with in not this blog post, but future ones, is the things that they can do to stop these
Sure.
array of symptoms. 75% of women suffer something during menopause,
yeah.
so we can largely prevent that.
That's terrific. And I think the other thing too is to know, as in differential diagnosis, you often need more than one symptom to call it something. So you would need to have a pairing up, because they often look like other things. So brain fog could be digestion, but it could be hormone change. So it's a matter of knowing how you would link your symptoms to say, oh, this is much more menopausal or perimenopausal, and the fact that you need to go on a detox and eat less sugar.
The thing is, all of that, I still believe whatever women do, keeping their hormones as well balanced as possible, fostering the body's own production of them, is going to serve them in good stead, whatever else might be going on.
Correct.
That, to me, is like a foundation. It's like gut health. That has to be good at the start, and then everything else doesn't fall into place necessarily, but it's a foundation for
if you don't
else.
have it there, the other stuff can't ever fall into place. It's sort of like it can't cease.
Exactly right.
And I'd say that concept of gut health is just as important to menopause, or the stress hormone and the blood sugar regulation hormones will actually take over, because they're master hormones. They actually cause the others to misbehave. So if you aren't eating well, you will have a much harder ride.
Oh, totally. And if you're stressed, you'll have a much harder ride, because it's the other hormone that sends our reproductive and other hormones into haywire mode.
Into complete halt. If you have enough stress, the whole thing stops immediately.
That's right. Absolutely.
So, we get off topic.
We're off
quickly,
topic,
don't we?
but we do this so frequently. We can come back.
Without a camera. Perimenopause.
Perimenopause. Perimenopause means around menopause, and this precedes the postmenopausal years. Can actually last from 7 to 11 years. traditionally suggested perimenopause begins in the late 40s, but what I'm seeing with the women I work with, it's happening much earlier. And there are lots of reasons for that, which we will go into later. But during that time, hormones start to fluctuate. So the estrogen, the progesterone start to up and down. And with that, of course, your cycle starts to change. Now, those cyclical changes are inevitable. They are going to happen regardless. But what doesn't have to happen regardless are the symptoms that can come with those changes, and that's the hot flushes, the night sweats, the brain fog, the mood changes, the sleep disturbances. I mean, the list is quite long.
Sure.
And the menopause rating scale suggests that 11 different body systems are affected. So dozens really of symptoms. And they're
It's
not
quicker to number the ones that aren't.
That's right. And I mean, when women say to me, oh, my life's over, I can't cope with this. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, well, that's not good enough.
So we've now got to the postmenopause, and you're officially postmenopausal when you've gone 12 consecutive months without a menstrual cycle. You're also officially postmenopausal if you've had a hysterectomy, and even if your ovaries remain, which is common.
Yes. Well, I think that's very important for health. If they're mostly left in these days.
They are.
And that's super important for bone health and future health, that the ovaries are still able to produce hormones as part of the hormone sort of matrix of regulation.
That said, we do see some studies suggesting that because the uterus and the ovaries talk to one another, if the uterus isn't there to say a word. Yes, that's right. Well, yes, right. So, the symptoms, as I said, are many and varied. They are not inevitable. There are lots of areas that I'm going to talk about. I'll divide them into 5. We're going to talk about the mental and emotional component, or I call that think. Then we're going to talk about eat, do, which is your physical and structural health, your exercise, habits, good, bad and indifferent, and then of course what's in your surrounds, what's in your environment. And each of those areas, there's some very significant self-help steps that can really reduce the symptoms.
Sure. And with the individuality, getting a personal profile means that, which is something we're quite good at hands-on, means that we can work out what is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck in terms of a change. Because some things won't be, you might completely junk your cupboard, your pantry, and it won't make the same difference as if you decided to take up walking every day.
I was going to say, taking up regular exercise, muscle building in particular, is my big thing, because it's, you know.
Well, under Wolff's Law, it's a critical part of bone health, and so one of the things in this blog you mention is that the change in reproductive hormones will commonly lead to a change in bone health. But I would also say that often there's a concurrent change in activity levels. You know, there's nothing like a busy mum running around after, you know, running a household, doing all of that stuff, and then having an empty nest and not as much to do, and so the activity levels drop. And if there's bad knees through inflammation and other stuff, now the activity becomes painful, and without the activity you don't maintain bone health. And we know that the research shows if you twist your ankle and you're in a boot for 6 weeks, in 3 weeks you've lost 30% of your bone mass in that limb through underuse.
30%.
So it drops very quickly, but it comes back quite quickly. So if you have a bone density test and it's low, I wouldn't actually look at a medication until you'd actually confirm that by doing food, exercise, that actually you couldn't build that back up using the body's natural feedback loop through parathyroid, thyroid, adrenaline and kidneys, and that those will be the components that would assist the body to re-establish an appropriate bone health level.
I think that's a really important point. Women have to understand that it's not a downhill all the way. If your bone density's compromised, you can restore it.
Well, you know, the body's...
With all the right steps.
Yeah, correct, yeah. So, other things for sort of the concept of the broad overview for menopause?
I do want to talk about the brain changes.
Okay,
Can we
Right.
do that on this video?
Well,
or
we
do you want
could
to start again?
we could allude to it. The other thing that I would comment that's in this blog is, or refer to in terms of the leading cause of death for women is cardiovascular.
Yes, let's
and,
talk about
and
that.
that's quite interesting because it's certainly the leading cause of death for men. I would say from my work doing regular progress exams, when women are sort of in their 60s, so they're in menopause, like they're quite
They're postmenopause.
post-menopause, so
officially.
they're now just a woman that's just, she's past menopause. Now, all those things that are problematic, like losing truncal weight and, getting your waist back to a slimmer waist, etc., the body's sensitivity to increased waist or gut mass is now totally akin to a man. So without the reproductive hormones, your hormone levels are closer to a man's. So your testosterone becomes higher relative to the reduction in the reproductive hormones. So now your body behaves physiologically in terms of its internals more like a man. So if you're overweight, you're more likely to have high blood pressure and high blood sugar. Whereas when you're 40 and still in your reproductive years, you can be 45% body fat and actually have beautiful blood pressure with a 100 centimetre waist. But when you're 65 and you've got that profile, now your blood pressure needs medication.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to look at the profile of the number of women that go into the medication sort of mould or remedy like in their 60s. Whereas it just happened at 65 or 60, whereas they were fine at 50, where they still had maybe the end of a cycle or just were tapering off their reproductive years.
That's a very good point. And the cardiovascular risk is not the symptoms of cardiovascular disease in women are not the same as in a man, which
Right.
is, I think, confounding
Yes,
sometimes for practitioners.
When I was doing my first aid, the woman said, and she was just fabulous, she was at Pulse at Hazelbrook, she said for women, one of the primary signs of a heart attack is feeling like you have a necklace on that's too tight. So there's not this arm pain, this left arm pain, sort of the chest tightness. It's more that you've got a necklace on or a turtleneck that's actually feeling quite constrictive. And that is a uniquely woman
Female.
thing. Men won't have that.
Yes,
So I thought that was fascinating.
it is. Right, well that's enough for the introduction, I think.
Yes,
I
very
think
good.
we don't want to...
So what we're going to do is encourage you to read this. There'll be links in this blog to Jan's page and her resources where you can look at her Better Babies and other books.
And if I can say, there is the opportunity for a one-to-one with me. Now,
Yeah.
on the site that you'll have the link to, that does suggest it's just all about fertility and preconception. But if you want to talk about menopause, I'm your girl. And you can opt for that option.
We can connect you. You can click a button and connect. And I think speaking to someone with an expertise who's now working, you do emails for a company that works with
On a
product
daily
range
basis.
for women managing their reproductive health, hormonal health.
And their peri and postmenopause
Well, that's
health
right.
too.
Well, it's sort of
Yes,
like
so the whole
that's
spectrum.
the hormone range for women through
Yes.
their 3 phases of life. That means you've got a lot of sort of clinical input and clinical work
I can
advice.
offer best practice and best supporting products.
Correct,
And I do that on a
yeah.
daily basis,
Sure.
which is why I feel confident that I've got something to offer.
Well, I wouldn't deny. She got an honors degree and topped the class, so she does everything not by halves but by wholes. Okay, thank you, Jan. We will meet again and talk shortly.
Look forward to that, Brian.
Okay.